When I transferred from University of Nebraska to Morris Brown College, my uncle said, "You want to go to lunch?" I said, "Yeah." Took me to lunch and introduced me to Martin Luther King. And I didn't know who Martin Luther King was, and this was in 1966. Having no Black experience at all, I vowed then that I was going to learn Black history that wasn't even taught in the Black school that I went to.
Thank you all so much for joining me today. As you all know, I've been working on a documentary on my father's life called Balloon Man. And what I wanted to do was kind of unpack some of the themes within the documentary, because yes, it's on a documentary on ballooning and a man who, was doing that for a majority of his career. But there are also other things that I wanted to touch on. We're going to talk about the latter part of Dad's career with the Costin Cultural Exhibit and Black history, and really just educating our people on our story. So I think it's a very important topic, and I'm really excited to talk to this wonderful group of panelists. So if we could just go around the room and just give a quick introduction, who you are and what it is that you do. Starting with Dad, and I'm just gonna go in order of who I see on the screen. So Dad, then we'll go to the Senator, and then Eugene, and then Contavious. So we'll just go in that order.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Dad.
Good morning. I'm Bill Costin. I'm the Balloon Man. Live in Hartford, Connecticut, and just happy to be here this morning to discuss this interesting subject.
All right, and say a little bit. So you're the Balloon Man, but say also what it is that you do, just briefly with the exhibit.
Okay, for years I've been taking the exhibit around to different schools and companies to educate people on our Black history, because I grew up with no Black history, and when I got to Atlanta, Georgia, I was surrounded about Black history. So that started my career in saving Black history and in developing it into a traveling museum.
All right. Perfect. All right, Senator.
Okay. Well, my name is Douglas McCory, and I am the senator, represents North Hartford, Bloomfield, and Windsor. In regards to this documentary, I will just say that I have been a huge fan of your dad. For the last 10, 12 years, I've known him ever since I've been in office. He has always been there at the Capitol, taking pictures, documenting all the historical things that are going on locally. However, then I learned that he had these great artifacts and these exhibits that he have in his home, and he takes them out to many community places and school districts, like he said, and allow our children, our young people, to learn about their history and their culture. And one of the things that he don't know, well, I think I told him that I am looking to create a location where he will be able to display all his artifacts in a public location. And what I would like to do is sort of like what the New York City Public Library System did at the Schaumburg Museum of African American Studies, which is really a library branch of the New York Public Library, to have his artifacts, his exhibits, all his historical information placed in a library in North Hartford, where the people in that community can be able to live it and see it for the rest of their lives. So that's my goal. Wonderful. And I'm looking forward to having a conversation about the Balloon Man today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Senator. All right, Gene.
What time is it? Good afternoon. Things are just jumbled together nowadays. I'm Gene Brown. I am the social media strategist for the NAACP. I'm also special assistant to the president and CEO, Derek Johnson. I'm 33. I like to say that when I say that I work with the NAACP, so they know that, like, we're not, just dealing with the demographic of 55 and up, which people think a lot. And I'm just excited to talk about the Balloon Man. It's interesting to say the Balloon Man, and he's sitting right here. But I'm interested to talk about Mr. Costa simply because I think that it's so important that we understand that the term Black history doesn't have to seem as historic as it sounds. And there are people that sit among us today who have amazing stories and are doing amazing things, and we need to make sure that we uplift them and give them their flowers while they're still here.
My name is Contavious Jones. I'm an educator. I teach 6th grade social studies in Cambridge, Maryland. I'm a professional musician. I actually had the pleasure of helping create a song for the soundtrack, A Balloon Man. And I'm the music director for the Maryland Spirituals Initiative. And so this initiative is all about helping preserve, helping educate using Negro spirituals that have origins in Maryland. So I'm just excited to be on the panel with you all. I'm just excited to be working with Chantal, who's like, she's family. So this has been cool to be a part of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So starting with you, Dad. So this film actually gives a snapshot of your life, beginning with your life in the late 40s through the 60s. You grew up in a predominantly African-American community. You went to an all-Black school, yet you didn't see African-American history in your textbooks at all. So it was kind of like a culture shock for you once you left and moved to the other side of the country. So talk about your upbringing a little bit and how just your upbringing and not seeing that history kind of propelled you to start the Costin Cultural Exhibit.
Actually, I would say the exhibit started with my father. Every time he left the house, I used to sneak into his bedroom and look into this little box that he had in his closet. And it was always full of little knickknacks and little pocket knives and all kind of little gadgets. And I used to be fascinated by that little box. And I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, which was a small town. I went to a all-Black elementary school and junior high school. And it wasn't until I got to Central High School that I started encountering whites. And, during that time, I never saw any Black history at all. We had no football teams nearby. And during that time, we only had, I think, 3 stations that you can watch. So I literally did not see Martin Luther King until I actually had lunch with him in 1966. So my Black history in Omaha, Nebraska was just nil. And once I got to Atlanta, I started encountering, all the civil rights leaders that King was involved with and Black people everywhere. I noticed that people were real friendly down south. And I was on the football team and, I was encountering just, friendly people all over the South. And I always wondered, I said, I wonder if other people have not had the experience of not knowing who Black people were. And even at the college I went to in Morris Brown, I don't even think they may have had one Black history course, but I don't remember seeing that. So like I said, over my coming up in Omaha, when I first started collecting coins, I started collecting different things relating to African Americans. And I just kept collecting, and it wasn't until I got to Connecticut that I finally came to a point where I was gonna turn that into a traveling museum.
Oh, okay. All right. So talk about just the impact that you've seen, with generations of different people looking at your exhibit.
It's really been rewarding. I mean, one time I was doing an exhibit at a little elementary school, and I heard the singing around the corner. And my exhibit consists of different panels. Each panel represents a person. and I put them in groups of, this particular exhibit I had, the Harlem Renaissance. So I heard this singing. I went around the corner and there was 4 women, 4 generation, great-grandmother, grandmother, mother, and a daughter, singing Ella Fitzgerald songs. And they moved to the next panel. They started singing Diana Ross, and they just went down the line. And it was amazing how all 4 of them knew songs from each of these people. And then other exhibits, I've seen grown men just crying, tears just coming down their eyes as they were observing a Ku Klux Klan exhibit I might have. I've seen, the most exciting thing is watching grandfathers showing their kids different people in the exhibit. I heard one grandfather say, "Oh yeah, this is Satchel Paige. I used to play with Satchel Paige when I was playing with the Negro League." And I was doing an exhibit at in Norwich, Connecticut once, and I had a lot of athletes in that exhibit. And I was standing there, all of a sudden I saw a woman jumping up and down, and she was saying, "Oh, Yao Ming, Yao Ming, Yao Ming." I said, "What?" And it turned out she was Chinese, and she ran across the Yao Ming basketball player, and she just started jumping up and down.
Oh, wow.
So everybody relates to somebody in the exhibit.
Right.
And that's what's so exciting, seeing their expressions and seeing what they're going through. Also, one other thing, ever since Facebook has been on, I've done Black History exhibits on Facebook every day for the last 10, 12 years. And I noticed over the years, I've had maybe 10 or 15 women actually Facebook me back and say that they love my posts that I put on every day. And they always make their kids look at my posts before they go to school. So it's just rewarding just hearing all the different comments I get on it.
Yeah, and you say that. I've had so many people, come up to me from different backgrounds, just appreciating the facts that you put on every single day. Like I didn't know about that. I didn't realize that. And there's so many things that I learn on a daily basis just looking at your Facebook profile. So, I mean, if you guys don't follow Dad on Facebook, Bill Costin is the name. So, it's definitely a rewarding experience looking at that. I'm coming over to you, Senator. So you've really been an educator for more than 2 decades. And now you have the position to actually have a seat at the table to make lasting change. And you gave a very, very passionate speech on the Senate floor last year just to introduce a bill, the Connecticut Public Act, basically an act concerning the inclusion of Black and Latino studies in the public school curriculum. So talk about that a little bit. How did you guys set out to, start this initiative? And now that the bill is passed, 2022 is the date that it's mandated in all schools in Connecticut, they have to have this curriculum. So talk about that a little bit and what you all set out to achieve.
Great, and no problem. So I'm gonna give you the short version. So as you know, I've been an educator for over 25 years in the public school system, starting out at an elementary school, then moving to middle school. Once I got to middle school, actually one of my mentors called me up and said, hey, he had an idea. He wanted to start a program for young men because he noticed that a lot of our young men, they were going to school physically, but mentally they had already checked out. So we started a program called the Benjamin E. Mays Institute. I'm sure you guys know who Benjamin E. Mays was. I know your daddy know. He was the mentor for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when he was at Morehouse College. That's what we named the organization, the program. Our young men were achieving at the highest levels that anyone has ever seen in the state of Connecticut. Why? Because what I did, and my mentor did, we infused African-American / Black history into our curriculum. This was done 20 years ago. And we noticed that our young men were much more engaged in the lessons, much more involved, asked questions, when they saw their own stories being told, when they saw the stories of their relatives being told in their books. It got to a point that one time we had a book, and for the first time in my life, I saw two young men actually getting ready to get into a physical altercation because they were arguing over a book to read. Now, that ain't never been done.
Right.
And the reason is we infuse African American history and culture into our curriculum. Fast forward 20 years later, I ran for office, and I'm currently the chair of the Education Committee in the state of Connecticut. One of my colleagues who actually lives in Bloomfield came to me a year or so ago and said, hey, I want to make Black history mandatory in our school system. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. So, you know, he was a rookie, he was a freshman. So I helped them navigate, landmines to get these things done.
I'm sure.
And hell yeah. And you know, it was perfect timing too, right? Because if I'm not there, this doesn't work, right? So it's not going to happen. And I'll tell you that because of my experiences living in Connecticut all these years and serving on that education committee for 13 years. I know how we move, and we don't move rapidly, and we damn sure don't move for us. Make a long story short, we got it. We created it. It's being created. It will be mandated in 2022. We're going to pilot it this year, but I'm excited. And the next level is right now it's a combination of Black and Latino studies, but the next goal, the advanced class, will be a much more thorough investigation of the intersectionalities of Black and Hispanic history and culture as we move forward. And hopefully it'll be a class that you can take and get 3 credits for college. So that's the plan. That's the game plan.
That's wonderful. And you sent over some of the sample curriculum, and I just want to highlight a few topics within the curriculum because I think it's wonderful, outstanding. So understanding the construct of race and how it was developed, investigating the evolution of African American and Latino identities, analyzing how race, power, and privilege influence group access to citizenship, civil rights, and economic power. Articulating the integral role African Americans have played in history, examining issues affecting the community, identifying resources and opportunities, and using this cycle to make informed action. So how did you all develop this robust curriculum? And what needed to really be taken into consideration to make sure you all do it right?
That's a very good question. And I have a very good answer for that very good question.
Okay.
First of all, we went and found the professionals, the PhDs, who actually teach this in college, right? And we got a cross-section of them. Clearly, we wanted to make sure we had people who taught African-American history. We had people who taught Hispanic or Latino history. So we brought all the experts in the room and said, hey, we want to come up with a curriculum that's real. This is not a curriculum about old names and dates of people we know throughout history. The Martin Luther Kings, the traditional individuals that we know and the traditional dates. We didn't want to do that. We wanted to scratch the surface a little deeper and go to the roots of everything about Black Americans in history and culture. So that's where those concepts came from. And I can say I wasn't the one doing this. I left this up to the experts, but I did review it every time they came up with a unit, and I looked at it. And I'm pleased with where we are. There are other people that want us to go a little deeper and make sure that racism is the theme throughout this curriculum, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's the best way of going about it, but we're gonna make sure it's embedded into everything we learn as we move forward. So that's how we got to the point that where this curriculum is being created. We left it up to the professionals. And the reason why, because I know, and you know, there may be pushback from people who don't want to teach this, who don't want to learn that. And that's why we got to make sure everything we put in black and white is factual and can be backed up. And that's why we let the professionals do it. All right?
That's very important. If they're teaching it, I know they want it to be accurate.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you for the work that you're doing. Jean, and just really along the lines of that, the senator mentioned, you know, in the history books, we see the same names. You know, we know about the Martin Luther King Jr.'s, the Rosa Parks, but there are so many other people who have made lasting impact and change. Enter NAACP is just a community of activists who work really at the grassroots level. So talk about some of the initiatives that you all have been working on this year, from voting, to everything that's going on with COVID, and why it's so important, the work that you all do. It's just making just impacts in our community, and they're life-changing impacts. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so of course, as we know, this year has been unlike any other year that I've ever seen in my life. And so a lot of the work this year is heavily focused on both voting and just having, one, talking about the issues of COVID, but talking about it in the light where people understand. And I think that everybody on this panel has heard before, when America has a cold, Black folks get pneumonia. And so when America gets COVID, Jesus Christ, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so really educating folks on one side, hey, a lot of the issues that Black folks deal with on a day-to-day basis are now tenfold because of all of the things going on with the coronavirus. And then we've got one of the most important elections that we've been a part of to be happening simultaneously. And so it's like the perfect storm, so to speak. And so we did something early, really, and it really was just to deal with COVID. And it was a We Are Done Dying campaign. It's now an award-winning thing, which I didn't realize was a thing until this year. But it was an award-winning campaign, and it really started to discuss COVID-19, the realities for Black and brown folks, and put together like panels with doctors and different folks in the medical field to also explain to our folks what's going on, what should you do. We just did a panel, a town hall last Wednesday, where we had Dr. Kismika, who is now, she's blown up and she's all over, the person that Dr. Fauci and a lot of these experts lean on. Right. And she was heavily involved in creating the vaccine. And we had Dr. Nunes Smith, who is one of the appointees from Joe Biden's incoming administration.
Mm-hmm.
And so really just to give people a little bit more of a knowledge base on this vaccine. As we know, Black folks are rightfully afraid of these kind of interactions. You know what I mean? Like Tuskegee wasn't long ago. Like there's so many things that we've been through. There's so many things that we've been through to where we have a healthy distrust of this kind of doctoral process. And so that was one thing. And then we did a Black to Vote campaign where it was really just turning out Black voters. And I feel like, as we know, Black folks and specifically Black women are typically the tipping point for whatever is going on in the election. And so that's been the two major things. And then we have Georgia coming up. And so we're still pushing Black to Vote in the Senate runoff. But really the NAACP is always on the forefront in two different ways. We have, I want to say it's like 2,200 units all over the country where folks are on the ground doing the work, and really putting an imprint on the day-to-day process of trying to uplift and empower the poor, the disenfranchised, Black folks and people of color. But then there's also the national aspect, to where, I don't know if you guys saw, but there was a meeting set a few Tuesdays ago with President-elect Biden, VP-elect Kamala Harris, and their administration. And the conversation was, there's no way that you go into your 100 days without talking to and about the issues in regards to race, equality, and equity. And so as we look, the interesting thing that I get working with the NAACP is I get to really get both an on the ground and a 30,000-foot view of what's going on with our people and the understanding of why it's so important, to the senator's point, to have these things taught in school. Because if your opinion about us isn't formed or informed by anything other than what you see on TV,
Yeah.
you can't possibly graduate with a real grasp of what's going on in this country. There's absolutely no way that you can do that. And it's interesting, to the senator's point, that there may be pushback. And it also gives you that level of understanding. Oh, so you're afraid of what happens when this thing is taught to everybody.
Right.
Because I don't believe that anybody is born racist. I think racism is taught just like anything else. And if white kid A gets all of this knowledge the way that he gets all of the knowledge about his history, white kid A may be a different person when he graduates school. And so I think it's very important that we infuse, and again, it's really just, it's equality and equity.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that doesn't just mean money and finances and resources. It means education as well, because, you know, I mean, we're raising the next generation of leaders. And so it's important that they have the tools and are fully equipped to help everybody. Right. And so I think that that's the one thing that last year, I went to Alaska for the first time because there's an NAACP unit in Alaska.
Oh, really?
And so what that helped me understand was like, oh, we're everywhere. And to the point of the things that your father is doing, not only are we everywhere physically, we've been everywhere historically. And so that needs to be talked about, celebrated, and shared.
Absolutely. Yeah, you raised a good point. You know, what if Black and brown kids were to have received information and that knowledge at a young age? What would that do for the trajectory of their lives? You know, what would they have accomplished within their lifetime had they have known and had the confidence? So NAACP President Derek Johnson recently said in a conversation with Ed Gordon that one of the most difficult things that he deals with is just convincing our people of their own power. So as the social media strategist of the NAACP, you know, how is it that you're able to control the narrative? So when the issue of, you know, African-American history comes up, we're not just talking about the deficits. We're talking about, you know, the achievements of our people, and we're talking about opportunities moving forward.
No, yeah. And so the interesting thing about, we call him PDJ, President Derek Johnson. The interesting thing about PDJ is he has come up through the ranks of the NAACP. Born in Detroit, he lives in Mississippi, and has literally had every position. So he's not the figurehead. He's not the guy that we bring in to stand there as people do the work. And so that's good and bad for me, because as a social media strategist, I need him to be a little bit outward facing, because he will dig down and get the work done, and only the work, and not, you know, really worry about the outward facing things. And the one thing that we had an interesting conversation about, and that he understands now, is we exist in a world where if it's not on social media, it didn't happen. And so you get questions like, what's the relevance of the NAACP now? And it's like, oh my God, are you crazy?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you can talk to people who have NAACP units very close to them, and they'll tell you that the NAACP has not only changed their lives, but affects their lives daily. But there's a large group of folks that don't get that story and that narrative. And so that was one of the things that we had to refocus in telling the stories of the NAACP currently, and then showing you that, you know, all of these things that happened historically with the NAACP is why we're able to keep going and keep fighting. And I think so, to the point that you mentioned of what Derek said with Ed Gordon, it's, if you can't see better, it's very hard to believe that you can achieve better.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that Black folks have been in certain positions or forced to have certain focal points about being Black for so long that it's hard for them to picture a different reality for themselves.
Right.
And so we have conversations, and it's like, man, you don't understand what it means for us to be here. So it's like the guy that has is born with $1 million, right?
Mm.
And he dies with $1,000,001. Yo, people may think that he's wealthy, but the guy that was born with no money,
right,
and dies with $100,000 put in so much more work, and we have to be able to see the work and the value of the work that Black folks have put in this country. Absolutely. So that we can understand that sometimes it's not about the finish line, it's about making sure that when the starting point is acknowledged and that you made it to wherever your finish line was. And so I think that that's where Derek was coming from. It's like, we can't continue to focus on the negative solely. We have to be informed by the negative and use it to get to a positive. Right,
right. No, I agree 101%, for sure. So moving on, Contavious, you work within Dorchester County Schools on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. Talk about your experience a bit working within that school system, and just to what extent do you think it's important for students of all backgrounds to have a more inclusive curriculum?
Yeah, so I've been over in Dorchester County for 4 years now. And it's a small little place, a small little town, city, a little small city. And the demographic is very similar to Baltimore. It's like a baby Baltimore. There's as much violent crime there per capita as it is in Baltimore. And many folks don't know that. So my kids are the products of generational poverty, these vicious cycles of trauma. And so they come in with a lot. And, I've approached teaching them, understanding where they come from and knowing the effects of living in that type of environment, what it has on your development, what that does to you as far as trying to build relationships, how that limits you to just come to the classroom and sit down and learn and read, right? When you have that type of experience in your home, it's hard to just sit down and read and learn. And so, I've done tons of research and study on the effects of trauma and poverty on childhood development, and been able to put that in my classroom. And, working with these kids, just seeing all the potential that they have, and more importantly, helping them understand their potential and where they came from, and the resiliency of the people and forefathers before them, and let them know that's in their DNA. I mean, beyond, that's more important to me than teaching social studies. It's teaching them their value, right? Intrinsic value. The importance of learning about our story. You and I had a little chat about it when we spoke the other day, is that for so many years, we as Black people have been robbed of our entire story. You only get that we were slaves. You only get that, you get these little parts, but you don't get the whole story. And when you steal a people's history, you steal their story, you almost rob them of everything.
Their identity.
You rob them of their identity, their sense of roots, their sense of belonging, right? And that's been something that, we've struggled with. And so telling these stories, your father going around with the exhibits, what the NAACP is doing, what the senator's doing, the joy that brings me, because exposure, as Gene said, if you see it, it's achievable, it's attainable, you can touch it, you know what I'm saying? And so creating these curriculums and presenting stories like your father's story, it gives us a sense of history. It gives us a sense of connection. It gives us a sense of, yeah, we are somebody because we got our story back. We got a story now. We got a story we can be proud of. We can look at slavery and call it a story of resiliency and resourcefulness, right? Not a sob story.
Right.
Like, we came from that.
Yeah, that's important.
You know, so yeah, it's all important. It's all important.
No, absolutely. And you gave us, a brief history of the Eastern Shore, but there's so many stories that come out of the Eastern Shore. Can you set the stage for us just a little bit for people that don't know some of the history within the Eastern Shore, and then
Oh,
talk about the initiative, the Maryland Spiritual Initiative that you guys are working on, and some of the work that you're doing with that.
totally. Yeah. So those go hand in hand, right? The African American history in Maryland and on the Eastern Shore, and the Spirituals Project. Maryland Spirituals Project started my dear friend Barbara Peka. She is an art historian, a historical preservationist, and she wrote a book chronicling classic Negro spirituals. And she approached me about doing a concert to perform some of the pieces. And I was like, that's cool. I said, but won't we start creating some content? Let's take it a step further. Let's create content in historical places.
Mm-hmm.
Here on the Eastern Shore, we have a litany of highly significant historical places. Birthplace of Frederick Douglass, birthplace of Harriet Tubman. We have the Leverington House. We have so many different spots on the Underground Railroad that exist here. And what better places to record these songs than in those locations? And so, the aim of the initiative is to create, how music connects people. And so we're going to take music as an opportunity not only to connect, but also educate about our story.
And within that initiative, there's some parks and preservation work that you all are doing. I know that you're in the beginning stages of it, but can you just kind of give us a little preview on what you all are planning to do with that?
Yeah, totally. So again, just early stages, but much like anything African American, it takes a while for it to get recognized like the rest of American history.
Right.
So there's a bunch of historical sites that are labeled as such on the Eastern Shore and in Maryland, but they aren't set up as parks. So many of these locations are privately owned. So the Leverington House, it's the oldest standing safe house on the Underground Railroad.
Mm-hmm.
An amazing gentleman owns it privately. There's a sign out on the edge of the property that says that it's historic and it tells you what it is, but we can't take our kids to go see it.
Right.
Right. Again, going back to what Jean said, when you go and see these places, they become real. Your story becomes tangible. Mr. Costin going around with these artifacts, our history becomes real. Mm-hmm. So the aim of the preservation work is to, take these Black historical spots and turn them into parks, right? Turn them into places where people can come and be in the history. Right. So that's just getting legs. We're working with a nonprofit that essentially just acts as a go-between the parks and privately owned historical places. Mm-hmm. And they just help with that process of getting them established as, real historical places where people can actually come and be.
Thank you for your work, and also thank you for the beautiful music that you did for our film Balloon Man. When I was thinking, I'm like, we need a soundtrack of 12 original songs. You were one of the first people that I thought of just to create something beautiful. So he created a song called Sweetest Sky. And I'm just going to read a few of the lyrics. Be ghetto, be a field, prison, or a pill. The aim is to keep us down. Trauma from the slave ship to the inner city pavement. Let's stop the cycle now. So talk about that song a little bit. You worked with two amazing composers and producers, Miles Roberson and Butter, on this song to write and produce this song. Talk about what went into creating this music and, some of the lyrics. Why did you choose some of the lyrics that you chose? And this particular song, it plays. So just to give you all a quick background, my father, when he was living in Atlanta, he grabbed his dad's Super 8 camera. And in 1968, during the MLK procession, he fell in line and he recorded the entire thing. So we have a scene in there, and Contavious' song plays over that scene. So, all right, go ahead, Contavious.
That's cool. Yeah, so the way that the song came together, I got sent the track, so I wasn't a part of writing the chords. I just got a complete song.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, write something. And I was like, write something? Okay. What are we feeling? Give me some ideas. And so we kind of brainstorm ideas. And I thought of, obviously the image of a rising hot air balloon, kind of parallel with us as a people, right? Just, we're constantly in this quest to rise and want to fly and overcome, transition from this place of being confined and oppressed to some place of freedom. And so that's what really fueled the writing process. And I just want to speak to the fact that, like, regardless of what these institutions and some bad humans have tried to do to us, we just have resiliency, and that there is a better day, and we're built to go trek that journey. We're built to go fight this battle to become better and to achieve more. And so the song just speaks to that. Despite what you've thrown at us, whether it be slavery, whether it be poverty, we're gonna go get it. We're gonna overcome.
Right. Well, thank you for creating that parallel. And that's really what I wanted to do, what I set out to do in the entire documentary. I mean, my father's a hot air balloon pilot, but his entire story is about flight. And just hearing him speak, just seeing him go through the various things that he went through, it's all about flight. And you can literally put your mind to do whatever you want to do. I mean, because in hot air ballooning and as a pilot, it takes a lot of skill. And I think every moment within my dad's life led him to become a successful pilot. And even so much so, getting the award that he got after 40 years of safe flying, it takes a lot to do that. And just beyond ballooning, just sharing this history with so many people and just educating people on a daily basis of their story, of where they came from. I just think it's a beautiful thing. So, you did that song perfectly with Miles and Butter and showing the story, showing the flight. So I really appreciate that.
No, thank you.
And Senator, now that we have you back, I just want to ask you, moving forward, there are only a few states. I know Philadelphia, that's a city that is doing this as well, but there are only a few states that are kind of doing this kind of initiative with the bill. How is it that more states can kind of get on board with this? I mean, it's simple. We need our history in these books. How can other states get on board?
Well, it's not that simple. It sounds like it's simple.
Yeah,
it should be simple. But the odd thing is, it was very easy for us this year in Connecticut. I mean, the odd thing is, me and my colleagues who are not Black or brown, they didn't know this wasn't being taught. They were under the impression that we were already doing this. Mm-hmm. And when they found out, they were shocked that this history wasn't being taught in our schools. Now, this is the people these are policymakers, not the educators. The educators know they haven't been doing this.
Right.
But the policymakers were shocked. And we got, the bill passed unanimously. Mm-hmm. Unanimously. In the Senate, and maybe 3 or 4 votes not. They didn't get in the House. So how do other people get on board? You got to have a vision, and you have to. It's something you got to want to do. It's something you got to want to do. We wanted to do this. I think Mississippi. It's about 4 or 5 states that actually do this. I know Mississippi is one of them, and there's some cities like Philadelphia, and actually a city in Connecticut, Bridgeport, actually teaches this. Okay. But I also want to add real quickly one unique thing about this particular curriculum that we're creating. It is the standard curriculum that every school district have to use. We didn't want to leave this up to school districts to create their own curriculum, because you know what will happen then. Somebody go get a little this, a little that. No, we were not having that. we create the curriculum and we create the assessment to go along with the curriculum. But more importantly, it was my responsibility this year to put the money in professional development to train teachers about our history in the curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
And that is very, very, very important, because unfortunately, the reality is 92% of the people who teach in Connecticut are not Black and brown.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to be trained and taught our history. And that's gonna be very nuanced, because really you're gonna have to erase all that stuff you learned back when you were in school, eliminate that, and learn a new curriculum, a curriculum you should have been taught a long time ago. So that's my point.
Got it. And what if there is pushback? You know, what happens then?
It's too late. I'm there.
Okay. Well, all right. All right. So Dad, in closing out this conversation, I just want to talk, you're a photojournalist, a photographer. You've been taking photos for most of your life. Honestly, you started this documentary for me in the 50s when you took your first photograph, when you didn't even realize I was going to do a documentary on you. So, you know, and you photographed so many people, from presidents to events. Honestly, he came down and visited DC. I think he came down probably at least 2 or 3 times a year for a march or some sort of event, historic event that was going on. So talk about the power of a photograph. You know, one scene in the film, we talk about a young woman who was a pilot who saw Bessie Coleman, and she became a pilot herself. And that's just from seeing your exhibit. So talk about the power of a photograph and how your photography has just really taught people and enlightened people. And, you know, talk about that a little bit.
Actually, when I was fishing as a boy in Omaha, Nebraska, one fisherman who was always there every time we went out, I don't know why he told me this, but he said, son, always record your life. And I never forgot that, you know. So as I was at Morris Brown College and everything, I used to take pictures of different things that were happening. And I just started, you know, realizing that pictures were very, very important. Like when the replica of the Amistad was being built in Connecticut, I literally went to the building of the Amistad to be able to capture the whole thing. I went to the building of the Amistad, I went to the launch of the Amistad, and I came up with a photographic history of the first 100 days of the Amistad. And that entailed going to each of the places. It started out in New York City. I said, I'm gonna get a picture of the Amistad going past the Statue of Liberty. And I spent 5 hours standing at a fence with thousands of people around me waiting for the Amistad to come in the Opsel 2000. And finally it came, so I was able to catch the actual Amistad in front of the Statue of Liberty. And then it came to Hartford, and it came to New London, and it came to New Haven, Connecticut. And I was there each and every time. And it was interesting, each and every time the Amistad actually sailed into port, I was the only photojournalist standing there. So I have some exclusive pictures of the Amistad. And I did the same thing with the building of the Martin Luther King Monument. I remember when I first went around there to the King Monument, I was standing in the back of the King Monument, and they said, you can't be in here. If you want to get a picture of the King Monument, you got to go around to the back side. So I went all the way around to the back side and followed the path around the water that's on the back side of the, and when I got there, there was a 10-foot high concrete wall.
Right.
But you couldn't even see the King Monument. I literally had to lift my hands up over my head and take pictures of the King Monument. I couldn't even see what I was taking, so I just took a lot of pictures. And it turned out I got pictures of the actual scaffolding of the King Monument and men actually working on the monument. So as I presented these pictures on Facebook, Facebook was a perfect place for me to put all these pictures. I got so many different comments on it. I remember one guy, he saw a picture that I put on Facebook. It wasn't my picture, but it was a picture that I found on Facebook, and I posted it. And he said that there was Martin Luther King and Coretta coming down the steps. And then there was, I think it was Abernathy and his wife coming down the steps. And the third couple that was coming down the steps was this guy's father and mother. He said, that was my father and mother coming down the steps. I'd never seen this picture.
Wow.
And I've taken so many different pictures where people never have seen them. And to support my actual exhibit, like I said, the exhibit that I set up is very comprehensive. It shows 400 years of Black history, and it's a visual. So I've had so many different kids that come in, and it didn't matter. I have so much in it. It didn't matter how bored some of the kids were. If they kept looking, they would find something that interested them.
Somebody to identify with.
And that way, they got interested in other items. And I really noticed that at the very first high school that I signed up at and that I had my exhibit at, people came in there and they just went and sat down and didn't look at nothing. And I said, okay, I got to fix that. So what I did at the next exhibit, I put all the hip hop and the rappers and everything at the very first table. And when everybody came in there and saw, everybody just crowded around the hip hop table. And that opened up the rest of the exhibit. Right. So I learned from each exhibit what to do at the next one. And I fine-tuned it where, I mean, people all ages, all nationalities, they literally love it because I really took my life and put it into it. And the panels that I set up 1,600 panels on American history. So like I said, it's a comprehensive exhibit of all of history.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what do you see for the future of the Costin Cultural Exhibition?
Well, I'm excited that Senator McCrory said that he's looking at a library and setting it up similar to the Schomburg. That would be wonderful, because that's right here in Hartford. And I've been on the board of directors for the New England Air Museum since 1989. And it looks like I'm gonna be able to set up some aviation history, Black history at the Air Museum. So between these two places, it'll give a good venue for people to come. And especially if we could set it up virtually, that would be wonderful if we can set up both of them virtually. So for the people who can't physically come to the actual museum and pick up and touch the artifacts and everything.
Right, right. All right, well, thank you all. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming and sitting here with us today to talk about our history, Black history. I appreciate all of the initiatives that you're involved in. And thank you so much, Senator. I appreciate you. I don't know if you're still there, but yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, I'm here.
Okay.
Thanks for having us.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Appreciate y'all.
Great discussion.
Blessings, gentlemen.